Welcome to Breit Guide, where we simplify Medicare. I'm your host, Megan, with Breitenfeld Group. If you are looking for clarity and confidence when it comes to Medicare, you're in the right place. This is Breit Guide, and let's get into it. Hello there. Welcome to the Breit Guide Podcast. I'm your host, Megan, and thank you so much for joining me today, whether this is your first time listening in or maybe you're a consistent follower of ours. Either way, I am glad you are here. And so our goal with these podcast episodes is to deep dive into some of these very common questions or concerns that people might have as they approach Medicare. And so you're in for a treat today. We actually have a guest. His name is Kyle. He's been on the podcast before, and he works in one of our other locations. So we are with Breitenfeld Group, and we are a health insurance brokerage based off of Minnesota and Wisconsin, and we heavily specialize in Medicare. And so both Kyle and I, along with our team, we kind of travel throughout Minnesota and Wisconsin and speak about Medicare. But this podcast is where we get to deep dive into a little bit more of those common questions and topics and just kind of dissect them out a little bit. So today is an important episode, and Kyle is the perfect person to talk about this because he actually meets also with people who are aging into Medicare, prospects who are looking for guidance in Medicare. And so today we are going to talk about common Medicare mistakes and how to avoid them. So common Medicare mistakes and how to avoid them. Big topic. Kyle, thank you so much for joining us today. I appreciate you being here.
Hi, Megan. Thanks for having me again. Yeah, this is a great topic because honestly, most or many of the Medicare mistakes that happen are simply because people don't realize some of the rules and the timelines, specifically maybe surrounding Medicare enrollment.
Yes, exactly. And Medicare can feel very complicated as you're looking at it, especially for the very first time. So today, Kyle, we're going to go through some of those most common mistakes people make, common questions that they have. And so we're going to right away dive into a really big one, and that is late enrollment. So Kyle, what happens when someone misses their Medicare enrollment window?
Late enrollment is one of the most common and costly mistakes that people make. Most people become eligible for Medicare at age 65, and they have what's called their initial enrollment period. Now that window lasts for 7 months. It begins 3 months before the month that someone turns 65. It includes the month that they turn 65, and then it includes 3 months after that month that someone turns 65. If someone doesn't enroll into certain parts of Medicare during this initial enrollment period and they don't have other qualifying coverage, they could face permanent late enrollment penalties.
Yeah, so when we talk about how they can face penalties, what kind of penalties are we talking about?
Yeah, the two most common ones would be for Medicare Part B and Medicare Part D. So there's a Medicare Part B late enrollment penalty and Part D prescription drug late enrollment penalty. For the Part B, if you delay enrollment without qualifying coverage, which typically is going to be an employer plan, your premium could increase by 10% for every 12 months that you were eligible for Medicare but didn't enroll. And this penalty usually is going to last for the rest of someone's life on Medicare. So we definitely want to avoid late enrollment penalties, specifically for Part B. To satisfy that, qualifying coverage would be an employer plan. The Part D prescription penalty works similar to the Part B late enrollment penalty. If someone goes too long without what's called Medicare creditable drug coverage, you can also pay a penalty that gets added onto your monthly Part D plan premium. And that does, again, typically last for the rest of your life on Medicare.
So you're saying a big takeaway here is do not ignore your Medicare timeline.
Exactly. So even if you are still working or if you are covered under a spouse's employer plan, it is important to understand whether that employer coverage allows you to delay enrollment without late enrollment penalties, allows you to delay your Medicare without a penalty, basically.
So that leads us into another common mistake is choosing the wrong plan. So Kyle, when you are meeting with people and they are new to Medicare and they're doing all this research and start hearing options like Medicare Advantage plan, Medicare Supplement plan, different prescription plans, how can people actually make the wrong choice?
Yeah, usually this happens because people either rush their decision, they don't fully understand how some of these Medicare plans work, and they make like a rushed or rash decision on a particular option. For example, someone might choose a plan simply because it has a $0 premium, without realizing that there could be higher co-pays or more network restrictions, depending on the policy. Someone might pick a plan without checking whether their doctors or prescriptions are covered by that plan. Medicare plans are very personal. What works well for one person might not work well for someone else, even someone, like a spouse. There could be two different plans for someone in the same household, definitely.
Right, because everyone's situation is very different. They have different doctors, different prescriptions, kind of different needs, even a different budget that they're looking at.
Exactly. So that's why it's important to look at things like your doctors, your doctors and hospitals and clinics, your prescriptions, your travel habits, your budget and comfort with out-of-pocket cost. Taking all of those things into account helps narrow down the best plan for that individual.
Actually, another mistake that we see fairly often is somebody not working with a broker or a Medicare advisor who really understands Medicare. Kyle, can you kind of break down and tell us, why does it make such a difference?
A good Medicare broker can really simplify the process. One of the biggest advantages of a broker is being able to compare multiple insurance companies and plans at the same time. So instead of trying to do the research and do everything by yourself, essentially, you get help reviewing the options that fit your situation. And also as a broker, we can help explain the rules, the deadlines, the plan differences, which can prevent costly mistakes like missing enrollment periods, right? Late enrollment penalties, or potentially choosing a plan that might not be suitable for somebody if they make like a rash decision or something like that. Many people don't realize is that working with a broker usually will not cost you anything extra. Brokers are compensated by the insurance companies, of course, but their help is typically free to the client.
And that's something a lot of people are surprised by. They can assume there's some kind of consulting fee or a charge that they might possibly get or something like that.
Right, and in most cases there isn't. Having someone guide you through the process can give you confidence that you're making the right decision.
And that leads us into another common frustration that people can have when approaching Medicare, and that's assuming that certain things are covered under Medicare when they actually are not. So Kyle, can you give us some examples of some misunderstandings when it comes to that?
Yeah, this happens a lot. Many people assume Medicare covers everything related to healthcare, but that's not always the case. For example, Original Medicare generally does not cover routine dental care, vision exams for glasses or contact lenses. Original Medicare typically won't cover hearing exams for hearing aids. Another thing Medicare doesn't cover is long-term care. Extended nursing home stays or custodial care is not covered by Original Medicare. And this is an area where some people are oftentimes surprised, to find out that Medicare doesn't cover long-term care. Medicare will cover short-term skilled nursing care, but not long-term living assistance. Even with doctor visits and procedures, Medicare still does also have deductibles, co-insurances, co-pays, depending on the type of plan that someone might have.
So you're saying it's really important to review those kinds of details so you don't assume that something is covered when it's not.
Exactly. Understanding what is covered and what isn't. This helps people plan ahead and avoid surprises.
I think another thing that catches people off guard is that their Medicare plans can change every year. So Kyle, can you talk to us a little bit more about that and why reviewing your coverage annually is very important?
Yeah, definitely. Every year during the annual enrollment period, which runs from October 15 through December 7 each year, Medicare beneficiaries can review their coverage, make changes to their plans. Insurance companies can also adjust things like their premiums, co-pays, prescription drug formularies, how their drugs are covered under a particular plan. Sometimes provider networks can fluctuate from year to year. So a plan that worked well for somebody, that last year might not be the best fit for that new upcoming year. So reviewing your plan annually ensures that your doctors are still in network, your prescriptions are still covered, the way that you would expect them to be. Definitely annual enrollment is a good time to take a peek at the following year.
And that is such a good reminder, because many people, once they pick a plan, they can assume that they just don't really have to look at it again. And that can be a problem.
Right, but a quick annual review can help, really prevent unexpected costs and surprises moving into that next year.
So Kyle, I was kind of taking some notes here while you were talking, and before we wrap it up, let's kind of recap some of these common mistakes to avoid when it comes to Medicare. And we talked about, so missing enrollment deadlines, choosing the wrong plan without comparing options, trying to navigate everything alone instead of working with a broker. I have assuming certain services are covered, and then not reviewing your coverage each year. So Kyle, did I miss anything?
That is a good summary. If people take the time to understand the basics, get guidance when needed, they can avoid most of the common pitfalls.
Okay, awesome. Well, I hope this piece of this podcast episode helps you avoid some of those common mistakes that people can make or assume when approaching Medicare. Thank you for that information, Kyle. And then, as always in our podcast, we come to you with a completely non-Medicare related tip, trick, whatever kind of we talk about talking about. If that makes sense, we've come to you about dogs and cat litter boxes, hard-boiled eggs. I'm just trying to think of all the randomness we've come to you. And so Kyle, I put you in charge of the tip, trick, and from my understanding, it has something to deal with a parking lot or parking in a parking lot. So Kyle, what is your non-Medicare related tip, trick, whatever that looks like?
This one might not be maybe a tidbit necessarily, maybe a tip, not sure. More or less just kind of a pull on, two sides of a topic. This was spurred really randomly as I was looking out my office window and my vehicle is out in the parking lot, backed into a parking spot. Obviously this is something that we don't think about probably at all, but we run across it every single day. We're going into a grocery store, we're going out to eat, we're at Costco, we're at Target, things like that, where parking lots can get busy. And this is just habit of mine now, but I always try to back into a parking spot whenever I am able to. And that habit basically is from being taught that if you back into a parking spot, when you leave, you are leaving that parking spot going forward, facing forward, and able to see, traffic in that parking lot very easily. I was taught it prevents parking lot accidents or just accidents in general. If you back into a parking spot, when you leave, you're pulling out of that parking spot going forward. I know it's not always the easiest to back into a busy parking spot when the parking lot is super busy, but I'm sure there's people that do that without even realizing it, and I'm sure there are people obviously that pull in forwards. And that's my little tidbit or tip or pull, I guess, if, comment section of this podcast, what's your preference of parking, going in to a parking spot forward or backing in? And I am in the backing into a parking spot camp.
Okay, I love that. It's kind of funny because my husband is somebody who always backs into a parking lot, and he is an expert at it because that's what he also does with his work truck and stuff. They're trained to do stuff like that. So I always know if we're going into a parking lot or somebody's driveway or anything, he's going to back into it. And he says to avoid any possible accidents or whatever that looks like. So I don't do that, but I'm married to a man who does. So I love that. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for coming on. And thank you for tuning into our podcast. As always, we appreciate it. Like and subscribe if you want to hear more episodes, and, maybe safely try backing up into a parking lot next time if you're not already doing it. We'll see, right? We are not responsible for any kind of accidents or anything like that. So take care, you guys. And until next time, we'll see you later.
Thank you for joining us today. And remember, you're not navigating Medicare alone. At Breit Group, our entire team is here to support you, answer your questions, and help you feel confident in every Medicare decision you make. If you found today's episode helpful, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel so you never miss an episode of Breit Guide. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time.